Oh, you got to get it out now. We're live.
Right now we're live?
Yeah, we're live right now.
Well, I'm not gonna get it out now. It's
Well, it's
out.
already too late. We're live.
Oh. Welcome to the Critical Christian Podcast. We're your hosts, Dan and
Justin, I'm Justin,
yeah.
and we ask critical questions about the Bible and provide questionable answers. And we're finally in some of the best parts of the Old Testament, which are the instructions for how to build things.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah, I was telling about my wife. I won't use her name. Let's call her Lallery.
they'll never guess what that rhymes with. Now that you've already said Val.
I told her this chapter has to deal with a lamp
Well, there's a lamp
and a table. And
it's very riveting.
that's the whole chapter. That's 40 verses.
It's quite a drama.
Yeah.
What's funny to me is these instructions were obviously part of a long tradition that was sacred to them, just like the Jehovah Witnesses have, they basically only have like one or two building designs. And you notice like none of the buildings have windows.
No.
Anyways, if you go sorry. You go to a Jehovah Witness, what do they call it? The Kingdom Hall. If we go to one of their meetings, their church buildings are all the same basically, and they're windowless. And essentially, what happened was early on, they wanted to know like the cheapest and most efficient way to build buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So they designed a really cheap brick building, and then they just use that design for all of their buildings for like pretty much forever. But if the Jehovah Witnesses last for another, I don't know, 1,000 years, it's possible that those building instructions could be part of their sacred scriptures.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Well, what are you trying to say? That before God told them how to make this, uh, similar buildings had already existed, or what do you mean?
Well, that is true, but what I'm positing is that these instructions were probably originally used so that people knew the appropriate way to design a place of worship. Like they thought the place of worship was kind of important. And then when people looked back on it, they're like, oh, well, here's the original instructions. Let's just make sure we don't lose these. Right. And then eventually the instructions became so old and so important that someone was like, well, we got to put this in our holy book.
So you're suggesting the Lord did not say to Moses these things?
Well, I mean, you already know my position on Moses. I don't think he existed, but um, if he did exist, I think you would be led to believe that he did give these instructions to Moses.
But they already knew the instruction? Or this was the first time they built something like that?
Well, so mobile tents of worship existed in the ancient world for sure. This wasn't like the first time
Yeah, but
anyone's built
not
one.
something this luxurious,
Well, that's
right?
the interesting thing. Yeah, you're right. So in the time that Moses would have lived, we wouldn't have seen tabernacles that were this luxurious. It seems to be, and this is my impression, that some of what's in the tabernacle was probably stuff that they had in their official temple. And then when they were explaining, their backstory, like, well, where did they worship when they were in the desert? And, well, obviously they worshiped in a tent, which was likely true. If there was a contingent of Hebrews that left Egypt and they were worshiping in a tent in the desert, which is pretty damn likely to be real. Like, to be sure, we've said it before. I do think that there was a bunch of Hebrews that left Egypt. And they probably did worship in a tent. That seems very plausible for the time period. Um, but my reading of the tabernacle is I like a lot of what is in the tabernacle is just stuff we knew they already had in their temple much later. And so I think they're probably looking back in history and saying, well, what was in the tent? And they're like, well, I mean, obviously they had this, this, and this, and this because it was important to us, so it must have been important to them. Um, was there a tradition? Like, were there a couple things that were original to the tent that they passed down through history? Probably. There was probably bread. That was very common. So even in the ancient ziggurats, the temples in Babylon, the ziggurats, they would have a room in the top of it for their God to dwell.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually put like bread or wine in the room.
Right, ziggurat is what we think that was the Tower of Babel,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty common to have a place of worship like this where God could commune with humanity, and then the God could also get sacrifices, and there would be bread for the both for the God and for the men.
So this tabernacle, is this a tent
Yeah.
tabernacle? So it's people got to carry this thing then?
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, I assume some beasts of burden will manage it.
Mm.
But that being said, it's a long chapter. Should we, dive right in or?
Yeah, I guess. Kind of wondering what the point is now. If you're saying that, I don't know what you're saying, to be honest.
Well, like a lot of these narratives, I believe there's like a kernel of historical truth in there. I don't know where the truth and the mythology overlap all the time.
I'm just asking, why is this in the Bible?
Well, because it was sacred to the people.
What people?
Well, the Hebrews.
When? You mean the Israelites?
I mean, this was probably written in like the 9th century at the earliest.
You mean the Israelites or the
Yeah.
Hebrews?
Well, they're the same. All the Israelites were Hebrew.
But not all
Well,
Hebrews were Israelites, right?
I mean, according to the Bible, all the Israelites were Hebrew. According to archaeology, it's not the case, but according to the Bible, yeah, all of the Israelites came from Abraham, which means they're all Hebrew.
All right. But you're saying this was not something that God gave to Moses, assuming Moses was real, um, so they could make a really nice little tabernacle. These were instructions that had already existed that they just decided to use.
That's my assumption coming to the text is that there probably was a tabernacle of some nature that they had, and it was rememberable enough that they were like, well, obviously we had a tent to worship in.
This looks a little more than just memorable.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But remember, these texts, everything we know about these texts so far is that they appear to have been written hundreds of years later.
All right.
Well, if we assume maybe this was written during the reign of Solomon or within 100 or 200 years of Solomon's life,
Yeah.
which you could definitely make that case. There's sections in Exodus that clearly come from hundreds of years after Solomon.
Okay.
But if we make that case and they're saying, "Hey, listen, we all remember our ancestors had this tent in the desert."
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're not going to remember what all was happening in there. I mean, they're very fine details. Most likely is they're going to say, "Well, look, we've got all these items in our current temple.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we have these items in our temple because God commanded Moses in the desert to have them at the tabernacle." They're just going to kind of extrapolate. Well, we have these because they had them.
Okay. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if they actually had a text from that time period that they were actually preserving. I think it was more or less they were saying, "Well, this is what we have now, and based on what we have now, we can make some assumptions about what they had then."
Okay. And then they just had it so that God was telling Moses so that there's some authority to it, or what?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. If you're doing a religious, cultural heritage for your people, and you've got these sacred objects, it has to come from God because God's the one that decides what's sacred. You
Okay.
know what I mean?
And maybe it did come from God originally,
Maybe it did.
right?
Yeah. Um, but there's again, you already know that I believe there were a group of Semitic people that left Egypt, and formed the basis of Judea.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the Moses figure existed or not, I think is irrelevant. If you think that this God is real, it's certainly plausible that this God spoke to a group of Hebrews leaving Egypt that created the nation of Judah. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Moses seems to be kind of a plot device
Mm-hmm.
of some nature. You know what I mean?
I get that. Yeah.
And his name in Hebrew typically means to like to draw up or to draw out, like
Mm.
being drawn out of the water.
Right. Yeah.
And you already know my opinion on people's names that match their
Well,
role in the story.
yeah. It's a good device for remembering
Right.
the role
Yeah.
in the story, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like if
Oh.
you look up the Babylonian mythologies, and just look at, like, the creation story in Babylonian or, like, the Enuma Elish,
Mhm.
and just look up the meaning of everyone's names. They all match their role in the story
Yeah.
or, like, their place in the mythology. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, anyways,
Like Abraham was called father.
exactly.
It's just a weird name to call your child, you
What could you imagine having could you imagine having a child and you're like, "I'm gonna name him Great Father."
know? Yeah.
Alright, well, let's get right into it.
All right, better start it up, huh?
We're gonna be here all night on rabbit trails. So, read verse 1 and 2 for us, good buddy.
The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to bring me an offering. You already received the offering for me from everyone whose heart prompts them to give." This is kind of interesting. Everyone whose heart prompts them to give.
Right?
So I presume this doesn't mean it was mandatory. Still,
Exactly.
why I don't know why it was worded this way, because God knew there were people who yearned to bring him offerings, but they didn't have a way. Weren't they doing offerings already?
Well, we don't know if they're doing offerings already.
It feels a lot like how churches, where they pass around the offering plate, and if you give, you give, and if not, you keep it going along.
Right? So, this is a really interesting passage because as you've already pointed out, it's voluntary,
Hmm.
right? And most churches you've been to probably has some sort of a tithing system,
You mean the collection plate?
right?
Yeah.
And most churches they'll justify the tithe by saying, well, Jacob gave a tenth of his wealth back to God, and Abraham gave a portion to Melchizedek in Genesis 14. And so there seems to be this principle that you need to give back to God. And, the 10% is kind of where they fall because of the Jacob narrative. But it's funny that they never actually mention this narrative, which is it's completely optional and
Oh,
it's actually for sustaining the place of worship.
well, I mean, obviously,
Right.
that's a given. Nobody's
Mhm.
at church going, "Hey, I didn't put any in."
Sure.
In fact, I've been to some churches where they have it's a bag dropping. You can't even see what, if anything, somebody put in there.
There used to be a time when it was mandatory. In fact, in the medieval period, they would require people to pay tithes. It was basically a tax. It wasn't universal. It wasn't like all of Europe. It was regional, obviously. But there were even laws that were passed at some point, saying that like if there are Jews living in the territory, whether they convert to Christianity or not, they still are required to pay the tithe at the church.
Hmm.
So like there was a period in which the tithe was kind of a tax system,
Hmm.
similar to what the Jews had with their synagogues. That being said, it's this is this is the most to me the most poignant way of like mentioning this is how you should build God's house is make sure it's from the heart and make sure it's voluntary.
Hmm.
People shouldn't be compelled to give. They shouldn't be pressured into giving, which and I guess the last thing I'll say is this: if somebody was pressured uh, into giving to a church, would God be happy with that? You can't imagine, right?
Yeah. I think it was Jesus who said something like, "If you're gonna go donate some money, but you got a beef with a friend or something or whatever, get out of here. Take care of that first."
I beg to remember the story. Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing, of course.
yeah, I know what you mean. Um, yeah. The funny thing is, Jesus spent very little time worrying about money. Jesus' standpoint was, you don't have to worry about money. Just worry about the kingdom, and God will take care of the rest.
Hmm.
Which is wild to me that you've got like televangelists and other big time preachers that are
Hmm.
promising people wealth. And like, I think even Creflo Dollar was the one I'm thinking of at one point said that if Jesus was here, he'd be, having people executed for not paying tithe when they come into the church. Like, buddy, I don't know if you're reading the same Bible I'm reading, but that's crazy to think that God would want people executed for not paying the tithe. Because his whole point was like, it's stealing from God. Like, no, it's not. It's not stealing from God.
Jesus is here, he would get crucified again.
If it, 1,000,000%, if Jesus came back today, they would crucify him so fast. There's no way he'd last.
They're like, "You're not orange."
33 years would be a long life for him here. He wouldn't make it to 33 if he came
Oh.
back, is what I'm saying.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, that's all I have to say about that. Any thoughts?
Nope, that's about it.
All right, let's read the next section.
Alright.
God loves a willing giver, not a
Right.
compulsed giver.
Right. These are the offerings you are to receive from them: gold, silver, and bronze,
Hmm.
blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and fine linen, goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and another type of durable leather, acacia wood, olive oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, and onyx stones and other gems to be mounted on the ephod and breastpiece. The
Mm-hmm.
breastpiece of the what?
The breast piece?
Breastpiece.
What about it?
Oh, where's that?
Oh, that's for the priest. The priest is gonna wear a breast piece, or you might call it, I don't know. It's honestly, it's like a smock, really.
Like a frock?
Yeah, not too far off. It goes over there's a breastplate that goes over the frock, essentially,
Mm.
and it's gonna have gemstones in it, and
Does just protect them from bullets or what?
no, no, it's a symbolic, situation. Um, but it is interesting here, so he didn't name all the gems. Later, we're gonna learn what the gems are, the individual gemstones.
I'll tell you what they are right now.
Oh, you already looked them up?
I looked up something.
Oh, look at you doing homework and whatnot. Alright.
All right. So people don't technically have to offer anything, but if they so choose, here's a list
Mhm,
of
mhm.
acceptable offers.
Right.
So we don't want any aluminum or anything.
Well, I mean, the thing though is like they can't just take anything.
Right.
It's kinda like, when they do like a canned food drive,
Yeah,
they're like, "We already have enough cream corn. Please don't bring any more cream corn." I feel like it's a little bit like that.
I get that.
Yeah.
Um, so I thought maybe you were going to go through every material here and tell me its historical relevance.
I would love to do that, but we'd be here for 6 hours.
Yeah.
We'd have to break this chapter up. I didn't think you'd wanna do that.
Oh, no, 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 no. I just assumed.
We could. We Go ahead,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I wondered if silver was worth more back then than it is now. Because gold just so far eclipses silver and bronze in value.
Mhm.
In fact, is bronze even worth anything?
Yeah.
Gold is 16,000 times as valuable as bronze.
Right now. Yeah.
More.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Gold is only 90 times as valuable as silver, though.
Mhm.
So I guess it kind of puts bronze to shame. Did you know that bronze is not found in nature all by itself? It has to be made in a crucible combining copper with tin.
Mhm.
Well, now you know. I guess that's how the Bronze Age came to be. I was
Yeah.
doing some research into things I should know but did not know. Um, Actually, I wonder if this helps to date this text, since otherwise maybe they would have used iron.
So it actually does help to date the text. I'm glad that you brought that out. The fact
Yeah,
that there's no mention of iron,
yeah.
definitely seems to be that there's a tradition here that goes back from before they were, really using a ton of iron.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
The one was the Bronze Age.
Well, the Bronze Age ended roughly 1,000 BCE, but it's kind of it's a gray area, right? Because when we talk about the end of the Bronze Age and the start of the Iron Age, it wasn't like one day everyone just stopped using bronze and started using iron. It
Mhm.
was like a slow integration, if you know what I mean. Um, there's a really interesting text in Judges chapter 1, verse 19 that talks about the conquest narrative, and it says that Yahweh and the Judeans conquered some of the people in the foothills, if I remember, either the plains or the foothills. But then he said they couldn't drive out some of the other inhabitants because they had iron chariots, which is a really interesting
Hmm.
thing to say. And
Mhm.
I don't know if we need to spend any time on why God couldn't fight iron. That's not important right now. The important thing is that the way the text is worded
Mhm.
makes it sound as though having iron chariots is kind of unique.
Mm.
And if that's the case, we would expect that that text was probably written during the beginning of the Iron Age.
Mhm.
So it's pretty archaic, I would imagine. Because if you're writing this, if you're writing the text in the 5th or the 6th century, who gives a damn if they got iron chariots? Everyone got iron chariots.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? That ain't nothing special.
I wonder what made iron so much better than bronze for chariots.
Hmm. Well, the thing with bronze is it's malleable, and it bends easy. And so when you use it for making weaponry, it just doesn't last. Iron is incredibly strong, not prone to bending, but you need like super incredible temperatures in your furnace to smelt iron. You have to get really hot heat for that. It's a whole thing. There was people that were doing like I don't know what to call it. It's iron working, but it wasn't necessarily iron smelting.
Mhm.
Like, you can heat iron up hot enough that it becomes at least slightly malleable, and then you can beat the snot out of it and make, like, really crude implements.
Okay.
Like, you might be able to make, like, an axe head, a crude axe head. But to be actually smelting iron took a very long time. And then they would do things like cold forging and whatnot. But and the long and short of it is the fact that there's no iron mentioned here isn't like a smoking gun for dating it,
Yeah.
but it does help
Right.
for sure.
Um. Yeah. So I had assumed gold and silver were used for their bling worthiness, but bronze doesn't seem to be very valuable. So I'm guessing if they had a better building material, they would have possibly used it instead.
Maybe. So the bronze was really interesting because in the ancient world they liked it not just because it had some structural capabilities, but because it looked really good. You can polish it, it would look really nice. So, like, you'll find later there are, like, incense bowls, and basins that are made from bronze, and those look really cool. You ever see a big bronze, like, basin? Like a sink basin?
I don't know if I have or not.
Um, but anyways, bronze, when you keep it nice and polished and whatnot, can look pretty decent.
I mean, it had to be pretty old to be made of bronze anymore, right?
Well, nowadays, we don't really make much from bronze. It's
Right.
decorative more than anything, right?
Yeah.
But think back even in, 100 years ago, it was much more common to find bronze and brass. In fact, hold on, Bible right here that still has a brass clasp. It's kind of frozen shut in time now,
How do you know that's brass?
because I know metals.
Okay.
I had to take metallurgy for engineering.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. It was a required class for me.
Oh, so you do all right back in the old days.
I would have got by. But the Bible itself, I think, is from the 1800s. Let me double check the date. You gotta be very careful with this one. This one's got very dry pages that wants to crumble.
Don't let me touch it though.
And this one's from 1865, and it's got a, looks like a bronze or a brass clasp. It's too tarnished to know, but fact of the matter was, I mean, They used it for a long time, even, like boot, uh, boot, fixings, like the
Mm,
eyelets for the strings and the
mhm.
clasps, common to use like a, bronze or a brass.
Man, that sounds like a waste,
Yeah,
right?
but
Should use something,
well, yeah,
gonna throw them away.
it's abundant.
Mm,
Copper is very abundant.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It must be since it's not worth much.
Well, it's worth more now than it used to be, but, it used to be what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, it was kind of like aluminum is today. Aluminum is very abundant.
Mhm,
But at that time period, I guess, you know, um, finding copper would have been like finding aluminum. There's a lot of it.
mhm,
There's a reason why they use it so much. Gold and silver were common for currencies. But it's interesting when they go to do the decorations for the temple, they use a lot of gold for decoration.
mhm.
They don't use a lot of silver for decoration.
Yeah.
I assume it's because silver has a tendency to tarnish. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
maybe it needed to be sterling silver then.
Maybe. What's the difference between silver and sterling silver?
Well,
One's got
I
one's an alloy, right? One's got
yeah,
zinc,
yeah,
or
that sounds believable.
what do they mix with sterling?
I said zinc, and I stand by it.
Now I wanna know. I gotta look it up.
Alright, well, while you're doing that, I'll talk some more.
Right.
So, a ram skinned, dyed red. I assume it was not dyed using blood, which would make for a very cheap dye since it was, blood is all over the place from all those animals you're sacrificing, and you can't eat the blood, so you might as well use it for a dye, but whatever. So I'm assuming they used crushed berries or bugs. Did you know it takes 70,000 bugs to make an ounce of red dye? So that would be pretty damn fancy.
Right.
It says berry dye fades over time, so I guess dead bugs would be the best approach.
Mhm. There's another one too for making the color purple. So if you go up to, like, Phoenicia, towards the eastern end of the Mediterranean,
Mm,
there was, like, this, crustacean that they would get that, they could use for the color purple,
mm,
but, like, you only get it in, like, one region. So, like, some regions got really popular for selling
mhm.
particular colors. But yeah, there's even today, actually, there's a number of colors that still come from bugs. In fact, one of the dyes that they
Yeah.
use for soda
Uh-huh.
still made from bugs.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It is.
You'd think they'd come up with a synthetic by now.
You would have thought, but I guess bugs are
I
cheaper.
almost don't want them to. I feel like bugs are all natural, aren't they?
They are. They are.
And, like, you never thought about it until you heard it.
But boy, does that mean Pop is not vegetarian?
I guess it's not vegan technically if eating bugs makes you not vegan.
Well, it's alive.
I know there's some questions there. Okay, let me think on this. Whew. Can you be a vegan and eat bugs and insects?
Well, vegans don't eat fig bars.
They don't?
No, because a lot of bugs die inside of
Yeah,
the
the
figs.
wasp. Yeah.
And then you just mix it up and eat it.
Yeah, people don't realize that there's, like, a wasp that has to fertilize the fig. So, like, every fig that you've consumed has got a wasp that's been trapped inside of it typically, that's been kind of what's the word? Assimilated?
I love fig bars though.
They're
So I
amazing.
don't even care.
I love just straight up figs, they're delicious.
Oh, well, I don't know about that one.
Oh, yeah, I do like the fig Newtons though. Yeah, they're pretty too. Yeah. Sorry, that was a rabbit trail. What were we going?
All right, so can you scroll,
Oh
please?
yeah, yeah, sure.
So I wonder if they came up with all these or I wonder how or where they came up with all these fancy materials in the middle of the desert. Because I know they looted Egypt on their way out, but I mean, they were just carrying all this stuff, waiting for a reason to use it, or did they do any trading with the nearby tribes? What would they even have to trade? Manna? It was only good for a day. I guess you could trade them a ton of manna, then get out of there before they notice it's full of maggots.
So that was my thought exactly. As they're listing all these necessities for the temple, I'm thinking like, where'd they get all this stuff from?
Hmm.
They literally just got out in the desert. They've been out there for, like, 2.5 months. Haven't been out there that long, and, like, they didn't have that much when they left. I mean, so much so that, like, God has to give them manna and quail.
Yeah.
So, like, they're not they don't have a whole lot.
Apparently, they have a ton of gold, though.
So, like,
They're just carrying it.
well, they I think the Egyptians did give them some of their silver and gold on the way out, if I
Yeah,
remember
some,
right. We don't know how
but
much.
we're talking about a lot. We'll get into it, though.
Right. But, like, what are they doing? If they were legitimately all slaves in Egypt
Hmm.
and they just now left, how much gold and yarn and fine linen and I mean, how much acacia wood and leather are they really going to have at this point in the narrative? It's wild.
Oh, we'll get into the acacia wood. Don't worry.
Oh, sure. Sure, sure,
Got a
sure.
big piece on.
Oh, good. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
let's get right into it. What
All right.
verse
8 through 16.
oh,
Unless
that's
you
a
have
big
some.
chunk for you. Okay.
It's boring.
All right, go ahead.
All right, then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishing exactly like the pattern I will show you. Have them make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit and a half high. Overlay it with pure gold, both inside and out, and make a gold molding around it. Cast 4 gold rings for it, and fasten them to its 4 feet with 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Then make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry it. The poles are to remain in the rings of this ark. They are not to be removed. Then put in the ark the tablets of the covenant law, which I will give you. Ugh. You know, there's something I was just thinking about. So you're thinking that this stuff was the stuff they were using in present day, writing this.
Mhm.
Why would they have an Ark of the Covenant in present day?
I think they actually had an ark. Probably in David's time period, maybe even in Solomon's time period. Until it eventually went missing. But I think the Ark of the Covenant was probably one of the lone remnants of the wandering period. I mean, I think it really existed. I think there really was an ark.
Why would they even give instructions on how to make that? 'Cause-
Well, they probably had it.
yeah, but I doubt anybody was going to be making another Ark of the Covenant, right?
Well, maybe. Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, that actually brings up a good point. If the Ark of the Covenant got damaged, um, theoretically, they could have built another one and replaced it without telling anyone. Like,
Right.
who's gonna call them out on it? I mean, theoretically, God would smite you. We
Mm,
saw that happen to Uzzah when they were
yeah.
moving the ark, or at least that's
That
in
hasn't happened
Samuel.
yet, I don't
Yeah,
think.
was that First Samuel chapter 6? I think so.
Must be.
But so like, yeah, touching it is a big no no. But still, like, I don't know. I mean,
I'm curious when it gets its don't touch property.
see, that's the interesting thing is like they're building it, they're
Mhm.
touching it.
Right.
Where's the cutoff point to where like you're no longer allowed to touch it? Where I know there's a point coming up where
I
God says not to, but
assume as soon as they consecrate it or something.
you would think. Although I that makes sense. Okay, so I think we might have mentioned this before, but idolatry in the ancient world. Okay.
Yep.
Um they didn't worship the actual stone and wood objects.
Right.
They had these elaborate mouth opening ceremonies where they would cleanse the thing, and then they would do an incantation and a whole ritual, and then God would enter. The spirit of the God would enter through the mouth of the object, just like God blew the breath of life into man. So once the God entered the cultic object, then it became sacred. Then, like, defiling it is a really
Oh,
big problem.
well, then maybe that's what happened, right?
I think you're right. That's what I'm saying. I think
Okay.
you, I think
Okay.
I think you nailed it.
Yay.
Because the thing that makes it sacred is the presence of the God, not just the thing existing itself. And it's pretty clear that the presence of God goes with the tabernacle,
Mhm.
which brings up one other point. We've talked before about
Uh-huh.
the angel of the Lord,
Mhm.
about God putting his divine presence in the angel of the Lord and whatnot and his
Mhm.
authority.
Mhm.
Well, if you've ever wondered, like, if that's a cohesive model, it must be because God's presence goes along with the Ark of the Covenant, right? And we presume God is still in heaven while the Ark of the Covenant is existing, right?
Right.
Or wherever heaven is,
Well, yeah.
which means God is capable of manifesting his presence in multiple locations,
Right.
which um, was not incongruent with what everyone else in the ancient world thought. Everyone believed it. There's a incantation in there's a series called The Context of Scripture full of different ancient Near Eastern texts. And there's an incantation that you have to recite for setting up a new temple for the goddess of the night, where they instruct you on what to do when you set up a second temple for the goddess of the night, which they clearly believed that you can have multiple temples to the same goddess
Okay.
and her presence can be in both
Oh, okay.
temples,
Yeah.
which is really interesting.
Mhm.
So this this is a pretty common thought in the ancient world that a god can have presence in multiple locations at once, but not necessarily being omnipresent. I think those are different ideas.
I mean, they're pretty similar though.
They're definitely similar, and it brings up one other question. Okay, if a god can manifest his presence or her in any place they so choose, and in whatever number they so choose, then nothing would stop them from manifesting their presence everywhere.
Right.
It's just like the logical next step. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I suspect that's probably how, the ancient people eventually came to that conclusion. It was a step by step process was the presence is here. Oh, now it's actually here and there. Oh, now it's everywhere. you know?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah. Sorry, what were you saying? Where we leave off?
Uh,
Oh, the ark.
yeah, I was gonna talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. You had a lot to say about acacia wood.
Oh, well, not right now.
Oh, okay. We'll
We're gonna talk about gold again.
keep that bullet chambered.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Um, I had questions, and I know there have been various answers on this, and I don't know which ones are the best, but there's a lot of overlaying with gold.
Mhm. There definitely is.
I can't assume that they're smelting the gold and then pouring it over. I know in the ancient world they would take gold and they would make gold leaf,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
then they would hammer it onto the surface of the wood.
Mhm.
I'm curious to know, like, how good can you actually make that look? I've never seen it.
Well, I haven't either, but I guess there had to have been some goldsmiths out there in the desert.
Right. I bet there's a picture of it too, actually. Let me
Alright.
see.
You do that and I'll talk about something stupid, alright?
Mhm.
So that's a lot of gold. Another description continues with even more gold, but I wanted to stop here for a moment. So, according to the best source of information on the internet, the weight of the gold required to cover the ark with a 0.1 millimeter thick layer would be approximately 17.38 pounds. This would be the amount of gold needed for the coverings, assuming a substantial but not overly application of gold. So, how much is that worth in dollar bills? That would have been $528,000 or 278 shekels. Suffice to say, that's some spending.
Definitely some bling.
I could certainly see other tribes or nations wanting to get their hands on
Right.
that, especially if you got like just some nomads out there, right?
Mm.
Like, wait, there's a $500,000 arc.
So if a foreign nation came upon this gold-laden ark,
Mhm.
obviously the dollar signs would have been ringing in their head.
Mhm.
Now, there is a story later on where the ark gets taken, and then they put it in a place of worship with the god Dagon,
Mhm.
and it basically defeats Dagon. The god keeps falling over in the middle of the night in the presence of the of the ark. So there seems to be this idea that, like, God is gonna prevent people from stealing it.
Mhm.
But not quite like the Indiana Jones situation where, like, if, if the Nazis are able to get a hold of the Ark, they can take over the whole world.
Oh, no, because they all died when they opened it up.
Oh, yeah.
It's possible if they hadn't opened it up. Well, who knows, right?
Maybe, I mean, I don't know how you would harness all that power, but
Well, I think the idea is fictionally that you have the ark and therefore isn't that how it worked with the ark?
that's not quite how it worked, but that you're not terribly far off. The idea is like, where the ark is, the presence of God is, and where the presence of God is, where there is like you have victory and success, basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's obviously not quite true because when foreign nations took the ark, they were devastated by it because they didn't worship that God. Um, but it's an interesting commentary on society. When was the first Indiana Jones movie?
It is.
Right. So people were still so religious in the 80s. Our society's kind of secularized now, but our demographic in America was religious enough that you could publish a movie about a biblical artifact
Mhm.
and like everyone, it would turn into a national treasure basically.
You don't think that would happen nowadays?
I don't know if it would.
Why wouldn't it?
I still don't think our society is as religious as it used to be.
I would say that's a good thing for the movie. Otherwise, everybody would be going, this is blasphemous. You know what I
No,
mean?
I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm just saying is I think it kind of demonstrates how large the American culture has shifted, say, like, in the last 25 years. I mean, 40 years.
I don't think so. I think they could make a remake of the Indiana Jones and the what's it called?
Because he's already famous
The
now.
Ark of the Covenant.
He's already famous though. But if they made a completely new movie, completely
Yeah.
unrelated about a biblical artifact,
Maybe the Holy Grail.
see, that was an interesting book. I mean, there's a lot of wrong stuff in it, but it was interesting.
There's a lot of holy relics in the Bible you could.
Let me think of one.
There's that jar of manna.
The bronze serpent, according to the Bible, the bronze serpent was destroyed though.
Hmm.
What else could you do? The golden calf?
I said the jar of manna.
Oh, the jar man is a good one.
I mean, because that thing never rots.
And the rod of Aaron.
That one's pretty big.
Yeah. Definitely
You
had
have to
a
be careful where you stick that thing.
yeah, you gotta be careful where you put your wood. So this is a
Was
picture.
his rod made out of wood?
I assume so.
Oh, okay.
This picture
Thought it was
here,
gonna be hard as metal. Okay.
it was a miracle rod though. Listen, he had a wonderful rod. That's all you have to know. So here's a guy overlaying what looks like a picture frame with gold leaf,
Okay.
and some of it looks pretty good. It looks like he's able to smooth it out a little bit with kind of the tool that he's using.
Yeah.
So, like, the process, obviously, they must have known how to do it pretty well. Like,
I mean, I hear gold is pretty malleable, so
right,
maybe it's like Play-Doh or something.
right. I'm curious if they had to use like an adhesive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just some thoughts. Anyways,
Yeah.
long and short of it is, I mean, that's if I had to imagine an arc overlaid with gold, I would imagine it would have looked like this,
Hmm.
but finished.
Yeah.
So not perfectly smooth, like molten and cast gold that's been
Hmm.
polished, but still pretty damn shiny, pretty cool looking,
Hmm.
Um, God come down and, eat some offered up bull on that. Why not?
What?
We'll talk about the mercy seat later. We're not there yet.
Okay.
As Leviticus, not
Oh,
Exodus.
don't spoil it.
I,
Don't
d- I
spoil
will
it.
not spoil it for you.
Very
Will not spoil
excited
it.
for that one.
Now the poles are interesting
Oh.
because the poles for the ark are actually kind of important. Says you're going to put holes in the ring on the sides of the ark for carrying, and the poles shall remain in the ark, and they shall not be removed. It's very important because the poles are the thing that allows you to carry the ark without touching it.
Right.
right?
without dying. Yes,
Exactly. And
so that's important.
once the presence of God is, we'll say, in the ark, I don't know, not a good way to say it. Once it's been consecrated, well, you really can't put the poles back in without running the risk of touching the ark,
I mean, you
probably.
gotta do a lot of
Be a little careful.
really careful, yeah, to
Right, exactly.
maneuver it.
So it makes sense that they would say, "Hey, like, put some poles in here so you can carry the dang thing, then never remove them.
Well,
Leave them in there."
of course. I mean, why can't you? I mean, why can't you touch the rings? That's not part of the ark, is it?
Kind of. I don't know. That brings
I
up a
mean, here's the thing. So, what is the ark sitting on?
well, I assume it has feet, but
Well, when they're carrying it, you'd
mhm.
think, oh, so okay. I guess I thought it might be lying on like leather or something. You know what I mean?
Mm,
But now I'm thinking maybe it was really just these rings that were like glued on or whatever.
maybe.
Glued on, yeah.
But I think you kinda touched on something important though, which is, um, where you've got theoretically an arc with rings and poles. Where does, like, the arc stop being an arc and be the part that you can touch?
Right, yeah.
I mean, how do you make that division? How would somebody know?
I mean, it probably is literally the poles that are the only thing you can touch. Because I'm thinking the rings are probably attached to it, you know?
Right. So everything permanently attached to the
Mm-hmm.
ark
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
consecrated. The removable parts are not.
Yeah.
But the lid is removable.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, is it?
Yeah.
Well, I
But they
mean,
gotta put stuff inside of it,
yeah, but
right? I
I,
know.
I, I don't know.
Just saying it's a very complicated situation,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, maybe they were like an oven mitt or something. You know what I mean? So they don't get burned. Holy
I
fire.
do love this instruction here at the end where he says, "You shall put the covenant that I am giving you into the ark."
Mm-hmm.
I assume he's referring to the tablets that and the instructions that he's getting right now because he's still on the mountain getting the instructions.
Mm.
And God already had him write in the book of the covenant, right? So we assume that that's going to be put in there. Um, so
Mm.
we've now got a jar of manna for the
Mm.
that's already been told to put in there, even though they don't have it yet.
Yeah.
Now we've
Wait,
got
no, they already made that jar, didn't they?
oh the jar, but not the ark.
Well, yeah.
Isn't we talked about that earlier when God said to put a jar of the manna in the ark? We're like, wait,
Right.
what ark?
Yeah.
They didn't make the ark yet.
Feels like all that should just be after this,
I
right?
know.
Like the Ten Commandments should be after
I
this.
agree. Yeah.
Why'd they put it before
I
it?
just somebody got the order wrong, I think.
Very silly of them.
It's weird when all you really need to do is like a slow reading of the text to find these problems. Like you don't have to be a Bible scholar to read this text and notice that there's chronology issues.
Yeah.
Like imagine what actually happens when like professionally trained Bible scholars are reading this. The amount of nonsense they're able to find, like, oh, there's a problem there, and there's a problem
Yeah.
because they've read it hundreds of times and they're really paying attention to the detail. Um, Normal people will notice these problems, but I don't think people are really reading the book. Do you know any Christian that's really just sitting down and reading through the Bible?
Oh, oh, oh,
I mean,
yeah.
in your like your church,
Uh, w- maybe my pastor?
maybe
I don't know, but
it's possible.
I
Like if you walked up to someone and said, "Hey, can we talk about the laws in Leviticus 21?" Would they have any idea what you're talking about?
be like, what's Leviticus?
Right. Yeah, that's about right. Anyways, I don't think people are reading the book, but we're gonna read it for them.
Yeah.
Let's read our next section. Is it verse 17 through 22?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Make an atonement cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide, and make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. Make one cherub on one end and the second cherub on the other. Make the cherubim of one piece with the cover at the two ends. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other, looking toward the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark and put in the ark the tablets of the covenant that I will give you. There, above the cover between the two cherubim that are the ark of the covenant law, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites. Or something. I don't know.
Mhm,
Really
mhm.
just, it's like, I'm reading it, but my mind is elsewhere.
Right, yeah.
So, it's like, cherubim, left, right, up, yeah, whatever.
There's so many words.
So I guess God is going to meet Moses
Mhm.
above the cover between the two cherubim
Right.
that are over the ark and then give Moses some new commands or laws.
Mhm.
So how large was this thing? I mean, they were going to meet on top of the ark and chill?
No, I don't think Moses was supposed to be on the ark. I think it was for God to come and rest upon the top of the ark or,
I will meet with you. See? I will
Mhm.
meet with you.
Right.
So Moses is going up there too.
I don't I don't think he means that Moses will meet on the ark with him. Um, in fact, on my translation here, it just says, "You shall put the cover on the top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the covenant that I'm giving you. Because there I will meet with you from above the cover, from between the two cherubim on the ark of the covenant." So, I don't read this as Moses is going to be on top of the ark,
Okay.
but I understand why you might make that connection.
Well, um, this ark was apparently the size of a small coffee table. So could have.
But Moses would have died. Remember, you can't touch the
Well,
ark.
it depends if they consecrated it yet or not.
Well, it'd be weird that God to say, "Go sit on my ark." No, I'll meet you on the ark. Because later on in Exodus, in Leviticus, it becomes clear that this is God. When God comes in the cloud, it comes in. He's resting on the ark or the mercy seat, as it's referred to. I think in the King James
Is
Bible.
there a chair on this ark?
Not really. So I don't want to do too much on it because we're going to get into it when we do Leviticus. Leviticus has a lot to say
Oh, well,
about the
then never
mercy seat
mind.
of the ark.
I can't wait. Yeah.
And some of it is, getting a little bit into linguistics, which makes it fun. But the long and short of it was, the ark, the top of the ark seems to be functioning similar to as like a throne for God.
Yeah.
And we see this elsewhere. You'll find it in the temple instructions, and you'll find it in other ancient Near Eastern temples where the throne has like two guardian cherubs, one on the left and one on the right.
Yeah.
And the idea was that there was these guardian cherubs that were protecting the king. And you would even see them like as you were walking through the temple. In fact, I've got two of them. Hold on, behind us.
The cherubim behind
So
you?
no, well, I've got a 3D printed. Um, this is for anyone who wants to see it. There we go. Oh, it might be a little bit blurry. This was in one of the Babylonian temples. They had two of these guys, and they would basically be there as like a symbol of protection over the palace or the temple. And they're basically like these divine beings of protection, kind of like we might read like the cherub. So a cherub was a divine, protector of some nature, just like in the Gilgamesh epic when they go to the cedar forest, they meet this guy named Humbaba in the forest, and he's the cherub of the forest.
Hmm.
So when we read about the cherubs on the ark, and cherubs can take many forms, it's very common for them to have wings like this.
So we're not talking about angels?
No, a cherub and an angel actually aren't the same thing.
Well, everybody thinks they are.
I know they're not. The ancient conception of a cherub is pretty multifaceted, and most of them had wings. It was very common for them to have wings. So I understand why people would think that this is an angel with wings. and
Mhm.
they just call it a cherub, but that's not really what a cherub would have been conceived of in the ancient world. A lot of times, cherubs had a mixture of animal and human-like features. You might think of them, like a satyr. Remember the Greek satyr?
Mhm.
Similar to that.
Or a centaur or a minotaur or,
Yeah.
sphinx.
Right, yeah. And these types of divine beings of protection were pretty common for throne rooms.
Don't know why God needs protection, but that's fine.
Well, it's possible that this could be symbology too.
Mm, of
You know,
course.
in Ezekiel, when Ezekiel goes up to the throne room of God, he finds cherubs there.
Yeah, but he also finds some crazy ass looking, right?
Well, so that's debatable. It's debatable of whether or not they're angels. No, they seem to be a metaphorical, visionary creature, not something that actually existed in real life.
Yeah, but you see on the internet people making fun of them all the time, you know?
Biblically accurate angels.
Right, yeah.
It's so
Somebody made
bad.
a biblically accurate angel cake. Did you see that one?
Yeah, it's
It had a
bad.
bunch of eyes all over the place.
That's just not what they looked like. But that's fine. I get it. It's sensational. It's
I
sensational.
mean, if they were, it would certainly make sense for them to say, "Be not afraid." 'Cause
Right?
that would be
Thought something show up with 2,000 eyeballs.
yeah, with those 2 wagon wheels spinning around, right?
I wouldn't be having a good time.
Yeah,
I'd be afraid for sure. Um, okay, so that's what's happening with the cherub. This is basically God's seat.
yeah.
Um, and I don't know if there's much more to say about that. What do you think?
So it looks like it would weigh about 177 pounds.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So it's a decent amount, but I mean, I've lifted one of those 100-pound dumbbells, not
Mhm.
all the way, and definitely with both hands. But still, 2 people carrying it shouldn't be too difficult.
I think you can get away with two people for sure. Um, I'm curious. I don't recall there being a carrying protocol in the Bible. I'm curious if they had a preference between 2 or 4 people, because theoretically, if there's 2 poles going through it, then you could carry it with 4 people instead of 2.
Yeah,
I'm curious if they had a preference.
I just assumed it was 2,
Um,
but yeah, that was it. If it didn't say, then whatever I assume must be right.
I'm sure 2 is fine.
It was probably like that Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, you know what I mean? Where it's like a really big honor,
Mhm,
you know what I mean?
mhm.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Ooh, excuse me. Yeah, I went there once. It was a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's kind of meh.
Well, when I was there, it was really nice. It was a good time of year. I forget what time of the year it was. Early summer, like June-ish. Quite nice.
A lot of unknowns.
Well, there's a lot. I wonder,
Seems symbolic.
if you ever thought to yourself, are there people in the world? Because there's a lot of Christians, and that there's a different gradient of Christian. Like some Christians kind of doubt. Some Christians are in the middle, and some Christians are like really fervent believers.
Mhm.
I think if you ever asked yourself, like, who really is a true believer in like God and the afterlife, I would have to assume it was people that were willing to go to war.
Mm.
'Cause I don't know, like, if you are a young person and you think this is the only shot that you get at life, this is all there is, there's nothing after this,
Mhm.
I don't think you're gonna be all that willing to go to war, are you?
That's probably why there's so many, like, suicide bombs, right?
Mhm.
Because I mean, they're promised quite an afterlife.
I think that's where you find the true believers, for sure. Either true believers or people that are just kind of, like, in a really weird mental state that just don't care if they live or die.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if they make great soldiers, being unstable like that.
Well,
Right.
yeah.
Um,
Just wanna die, be a hero, and
yeah.
go to heaven.
Well, and I have an aunt who, somebody was she was telling me the story. One of her neighbors was trying to convince her that she should get a gun for protection, and she was like, "Why?" Like, "Well, what if someone breaks in your house?" She's like, "So?" They're like, "Well, they could kill you," and she's like, So? And she's like, "I'm gonna go to heaven. What do I care?"
Mm,
I was like, "Oh, yeah, she's a true believer."
yeah.
Obviously, yeah. But that's a really good point because, like, if you're a really true believer and, like, you don't have any kids and,
Mm.
like, you really believe that if someone kills you, you're going to heaven, I don't know how I don't know how you would justify, you know, killing another human being and risking committing, a sin versus just, like, going to
Whoa, whoa,
heaven.
it's only sin at night or in the daytime.
It's
Sorry,
only a sin if you
in
do
the
it during the
day.
daytime, that's
Yes,
right,
yes.
according to Exodus. So, but I thought that was a very good point that she made, like, if you're really a Christian, you shouldn't be afraid of dying,
Mhm.
if you truly believe,
Right, I get that.
you know what I mean?
I'm very afraid of dying.
I think everyone is. Most people are.
Except for that one lady you said.
I mean, obviously, there are some that are not.
I envy that,
I
actually.
I do too, actually. There's a reason why this fear of death is so kind of universal. You know, because it seems to be well, not only is it inevitable, but it seems to be that we don't have, like, a lot of great tangible evidence for the afterlife. There's a lot of
Right,
things
yeah.
that are made by inference, not by evidence.
I guess you can't have it.
Apparently not, it's very difficult.
Or you can, but you're not sure if it's evidence.
Right, right.
Like, when they have those near-death experiences, say, "Well, that's evidence." And it's like, "Is it?" I don't
Right, and
know.
there's, like, a bunch of Muslims that die and meet Muhammad, and there's, like, Hindus that meet the Hindu gods. You're like, well, I mean,
Is that right?
yeah.
By the way, you know how you said it was just some chemical in your brain?
Mhm.
That is 100% false, so you should look into that, all right? I don't know
Okay.
where you read your garbage stuff, all right?
I'll look into it.
Probably from Atheists Monthly or something.
No, no. I'm so tired tonight. It's such a Monday, man.
There is a Monday.
Work really took it out of me.
I get that.
All right, well, let's read our next section, 23 through 30 here.
Let's do it. To 29.
Right.
All right. Make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, a cubit wide, and a cubit and a half high. Overlay it with pure gold and make a gold molding around it. Also make around it a rim a handbreadth wide. And put a gold molding on the rim. Make 4 gold rings for the table and fasten them to the 4 corners where the 4 legs are. The rings are to be close to the rim to hold the poles used in carrying the table. Make the poles of acacia wood, overlay them with gold, and carry the table with them. And make its plates and dishes of pure gold, as well as its pitchers and bowls for the pouring out of offerings. So, I was curious why they used acacia wood, if it was special.
Mhm.
As it turns out, it's very resistant to decay and
Mhm.
resistant to insects. And apparently there's other reasons, like how it can represent the union of earthly and divine, whatever. Because of the gold in it, which is God. In conclusion, it was probably just expensive wood at the time. And people thought, well, it isn't gold, but we can't just use gold for everything. However, yeah, let's say, um, I'm curious about its cost. So, how much would acacia wood cost now? Well, it's about $17 to $20 a foot. For comparison, Purple Heart, the gold standard for wood, is $10 to $15 per foot. Also, Purple Heart sawdust causes skin rashes and
Oh.
respiratory issues, but it's beautiful. So
Mm.
I don't.
So, I've got some acacia wood upstairs, some bowls, and,
Aren't we already upstairs?
no, I mean, in my attic,
Oh, you think?
and it's a very
Oh,
durable hard wood. It's a great wood.
yeah. I mean, no, 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 no. Nobody's knocking,
Mhm.
knocking.
Mhm,
But,
mhm, mhm.
but, are there better, more resistant wood? And the answer is yes, there are. We have Ipe, teak, and old growth redwood. So acacia wasn't the best, but was it the best available?
I think it was the best available, to be honest.
Don't ruin it.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Um, So it was apparently just really abundant in the region of the Sinai Peninsula. And the only other wood worth using with similar properties was cedar on this kind. So I think it was used mainly because it was practical, less than that it was expensive, which it probably wasn't expensive. All over the place, you know?
And I'm quite glad that you mentioned the cedar, namely the lack of cedar.
Mm-hmm.
Because if this was a tradition from the north, like up in Ephraim territory,
Mm-hmm.
we would expect that they'd be looking for cedars or cedar wood
Mm-hmm.
because it was abundant. And when Solomon builds his temple, he's got tons of cedar wood in the temple because at that time, they've conquered the entire land. They have access to the north, and they've got an agreement with Hiram from Tyre to get all that wood.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting here that in this story, the wood that they're acquiring matches the location they would have been in,
Mm-hmm.
which I think reinforces that this whole building of the tabernacle situation has some layers of authenticity to it. You know what I mean? It feels like it's from the time period and the location that we would expect.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a good feeling?
It is a good film.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if we were reading this and it said like make everything out of cedar wood, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
Where? There's no cedar where they're at. They have
Mm-hmm.
nowhere to get it from. You know what I mean?
I think we'd find another reason uh, that would be all right.
Right. Yeah.
Like, for instance, we would say, well, yeah, but that's the kind of wood they had available to when they were,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, actually, you know what else they have available to them?
What's that?
Lots and lots of copper. So, I mean, to make bronze, obviously,
Mm,
but near where they are, especially towards Edom and in Midia, there's tons of copper mines.
mm,
So, like, we would expect down in this location that they would have gold, copper, and acacia wood. Those are like the 3 things you would expect them to have. Gold was super abundant in Egypt. It was like the land of gold. Copper, super abundant in the territory they're in right now, and acacia wood as well. So, like, the hallmarks of this story, they sound true. They sound plausible.
so maybe gold wasn't worth as much back then?
Well, it was worth a lot, but it wasn't like today where, like, you get an ounce of gold and you can have a payday for a month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was valuable, but it wasn't I don't think, it was as valuable as it is today.
Well,
Um,
I guess we'll have to see
sure,
because they wrote on that.
sure.
So, all right.
Alright, can't wait. I'm excited for it.
Could be.
Where
It should
where
be.
do we leave off in this thing?
Oh, well, we got plenty of time.
The acacia
We
wood?
can just chill for a little bit. I think this should be our 15-minute intermission.
I don't know that's how this works.
Everybody can use the restroom, get a drink.
My translation says flagons and bowls. Have you ever seen a flagon? Do you know what that is?
I'm sure it's a big old mug, right?
I mean, I'm assuming it is, but, like,
Because they got like flagons of beer.
this translation was done hold on. This translation that we're using here on the screen is pretty recent. I don't know why they would use the word flagon.
That's an interesting Bible.
Have you ever heard the word in conversation?
I mean, in a way, but just like when we're talking about like these role play. You know what I mean?
Dungeons and flagons?
Yeah. Yeah, that was clever.
We got one.
That's a good one, yeah.
All right, we're in 25, 29 is where we find flagons. This is the Princess Bible. It is the International Children's Bible. They'll have easier wording for me. I
Why
want to
don't we
know what
just why don't we
they.
just get the message?
This is not too much different, actually.
Okay.
Okay, here's what it says for verse 30. On the table, you will put bread. I'm sorry, we want 29. Make the plates and bowls for the table out of pure gold. So they're saying the plates are the flagons.
I don't think so. Because it mentions plates and dishes and flagons.
Isn't it interesting? I
Should I be checking out the message then?
go check the message while you're at it. I want to see
Can
what
I
they're
have
doing
to,
with
right?
this. A
Can I have
flagon.
to?
I mean, obviously, we're going to check the dictionary here in a second. to see what it actually says in Hebrew, but
Okay.
I've never heard of a flagon. In verse 29, it
Like a
says,
flagon of mead?
No.
Oh.
Says you will make plates and cups as well as pitchers and bowls for pouring libations. And then they don't really say much about it in the study Bible. So now I'm just going to have to look up the word flagon.
Alright. It
Uh,
says, make plates, bowls, jars, and jugs for pouring out offerings. So I think it was maybe
it's a
jugs
pitcher, yeah.
is what they decided on.
A large container with drinks to be served in it.
Okay.
You'd think at yeah, at both of us being 40 years old, we would have learned of a flagon by now.
What
How is no one using this word anymore?
oh, were they using it back then?
I don't
Like, why
know.
did it get translated as that?
Yeah, that's such a weird editorial decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you could have called it sorts of things. The picture even, right?
So it comes from a mixture. It comes from Latin, from flasco, translated into French as flacon, and then in the Middle English as flagon. So it started as a flask,
Right.
basically. Flasco from Latin.
Mhm.
So the original was flask, and they got all the way from flask to flagon.
Mhm.
That's a wild turn of events, isn't it?
So what's the actual word?
Well, I guess we would just call it probably
No, I meant in like Hebrew or whatever.
oh, let me see what they actually had in here. Uh, what verse was it? 29, I think.
Yeah.
Probably this guy right here is what they use for flagons. It's got translated as jars.
Then why did they use flagons and not jars?
Well, flagons is an English word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jars is also in English.
I know.
Okay.
It is true. Oh, didn't like my extract from the word. Um, I don't know if I like this particular website. I mean, it doesn't give me any definitions. Let's do Exodus 25, 29, and we'll check it on Bible Hub. So there we go. Pictures. I tried to copy this word here. This is the unconjugated part of the word. I didn't like it. So it comes from kasha, and kasha is only used 4 times in the Bible. So it's not a very common
Mm.
word.
Okay.
It's from an unused word defined as a jug or a jar. This is the smallest entry for the Brown's Driver Briggs dictionary I've ever seen. Just a kind of jug or a jar. That's it. That's all they got. Fair enough. Okay, so here's the deal, though. Of all the words that could be there, flagon is clearly the most entertaining.
Mhm.
Why would you change it? It's the best one now. It's my favorite word. I'm gonna start incorporating it into everyday conversation.
Can certainly try.
So, you know, next time you come over, maybe we'll have ourselves some coffee and out of some flagons.
Maybe some. Maybe that's a lot though, but
Is the plural of a flagon a flag eye?
I have no idea.
It came originally from Latin.
I guess it has to.
I don't know. There's some questions.
Yeah.
Anyways, did you have anything else to add to this?
I hope not.
All right, let's go to the most exciting part, the lampstand.
Nope. We have 30.
Oh, wait. I thought we included that.
Nope,
Sorry.
we didn't.
I apologize.
Well, that's fine.
All right, go ahead.
Put the bread of the presence on this table to be before me at all times. So if I had to guess, I'd say this bread was some of the manna in the jar that Aaron was told to save, but I really don't.
Well, my understanding is that it's just actually baked bread. We get more information on this in Leviticus
All right.
and even in 1 Samuel 21 when David is on the run. It talks about the bread because the bread had to be made daily.
Okay.
There's a couple times in the Bible where we learn that the bread of the presence is made fresh daily.
Bread of the presence.
The
What?
presence of the Lord, because it's in the same room as the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
So the Holy of Holies is where the presence of God would be.
Uh-huh.
So anything in that room would be in the presence of God.
Uh-huh.
So the bread of presence.
What's the point of that? God doesn't eat bread?
Mm, just wait till we get to Leviticus, buddy. You're gonna you're gonna find out some fun things.
I'm fine.
There's some language in Leviticus that will make you think otherwise.
Oh boy. Okay. Well,
You
we'll get to it next year, I guess.
gotta remember, everybody in the ancient world believed that the gods were consuming the food in some way.
Yeah, but we know it's just the priests, right?
Do we?
Yeah.
Wait till we get to Leviticus.
Yeah, all right.
Leviticus is really fun. There's some stuff in there that are pretty explicitly suggesting that the stuff that is being sacrificed to God is food for God. Pretty wild.
I just feel like the priests would, come in the next morning and be like, "Hey, what's this bread doing here?"
So the way they conceived of it, okay, with like the priests could eat the bread, by the way. It wasn't just for God. Um okay, so the way they conceived of Yahweh consuming the stuff is different than the way they assumed the idols were consuming it.
Okay.
So in the ancient world, people believed that the idol was legitimately consuming the food, which means the priest was just constantly tricking people. Now, that
No, that's not what they believed. I thought they believed that you were giving it to them as an offering, but they clearly couldn't eat it, and so the priests would eat it.
well, the priest would share in it. They would you would part of it, but
I didn't think that they were tricking them.
they were.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, that's the whole point of the Bell and the Dragon narrative. In the narrative of Bell and the Dragon, they're basically exposing the priests.
I'm sorry. Is that in the Bible?
Yeah.
The bell and the dragon.
Yeah, it's sometimes referred to as the additions to Daniel if you actually have a real Bible that includes the Apocrypha. It's
Oh well.
it's in various locations depending what type of Bible you're using, but this is the NABRE
Okay.
and
Yes, that's a book for me.
it's it's gonna have it listed. Where did they hide it in here? See, they got first and second Maccabees in a particular order. They've got Tobit. Do they have the Daniel editions? They gotta have the Daniel editions. They might not have it in this one. I know the NRSV has it though for sure.
Hmm.
If you got the NRSV Bible, you'll find an edition to Daniel called Bell and the Dragon. I'm curious if they just included it at the end of Daniel and just called it Daniel. Let me check. 'Cause that's a possibility.
The bell and the dragon.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Bel was another name for Lord Marduk. I'm not really sure where they came up with the name Bel and the Dragon, but the long and short of it is it's a really interesting story where basically there's this charade where the priests are outed for actually eating the food that is left overnight for the god
Hmm.
by putting like ashes on the floor so that someone's footprints could track them. And it was discovered that, the priests all along were the ones eating it, which is wild because in reality, that's legitimately what was happening in the ancient world. There's a lot of people that were legitimately convinced that that was how the whole system worked. And what was really happening, oh, there we go. So in the NABRE, they don't have a separate book called Bell and the Dragon. They just have it at the end of Daniel.
Is that a book?
That's the New American Bible Revised
The
Edition.
bell and the dragon is a book.
Well, in the NRSV Bible, Bell and the Dragon is a separate book. In the
Really?
NABRE, they just added it to the end of Daniel because it's technically just an addition to Daniel.
Oh. Okay.
And it's not very long. There's two editions at the end of Daniel. The first edition is called Susanna, or some people call it the Song of Susanna. The last edition is chapter 14, and it's called Bel and the Dragon. And that's a very short story, only a couple paragraphs, where
Mm.
basically they expose the whole idolatry system. But the long and short of it is, the Hebrews had their own conception of how it worked with their God, because if God wasn't legitimately eating these things, then why are we sacrificing anything to God? What's all this nonsense? Why are we burning up all these bulls? Well, most Old Testament scholars believe that the general conception was that the God of the Hebrews was different because God would come down in a thick cloud, remember?
Mhm.
And there's really no difference in the ancient world between like clouds of smoke and clouds from the sky. They were not all that dissimilar to them. Um,
Okay.
and so by turning it into smoke, they were transforming it into a form of matter that God could consume. That's why the offerings are a pleasing aroma to the Lord.
Okay. Okay.
So, it wasn't that he was physically eating it, is that they were transforming it into a different state of matter in which that state of matter was now congruent with God's state of matter,
Oh.
and he would consume it in that manner. So that was kind of their way of explaining why God needed the sacrifices and offerings.
I thought all them sacrifices was because of sins, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, that's the narrative, but the reality is everybody in the ancient world was sacrificing. Even before that, remember, they were sacrificing in the garden. You know, Cain and Abel had sacrifices. Noah sacrificed when they got off the boat. I mean, everyone was sacrificing to God.
Right, because of their sins.
No, I mean, even just remember, Jacob just gave offerings at will when he had the opportunity to, and gave libations and whatnot. In the ancient world, you didn't just offer sacrifices because you sinned. You'd offer sacrifice as a sign of gratitude to God,
Yeah.
right? Now, certainly, if you did sin against your God, you will want to give a sacrifice because it's like a form of appeasement,
Mhm.
you know. "Hey, I'm really sorry I did the thing, you know. It's like when you were a kid and you knew you did something bad and mom was gonna catch you, and you're like, I need to butter her up as soon as she gets home from work and like try not to get punished.
Yeah. So you go kill a goat or something.
Yeah. I think that was a general idea in the ancient world. I think that's how it started, sacrificial system.
Hmm.
Um, but the long and short of it is, the bread was going to be eaten by the priest typically.
Okay.
It was sacred, it was holy, so not any Joe Schmo could consume it.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonder what happened if the priest took it out of there and gave it to
Hmm.
somebody, if they would die or what.
Mm-mm. They wouldn't, because in 1 Samuel 21, it actually happened.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, David and his men um, show up at one of the shrines at Nob, and Ahimelech, who's a priest there at the time, gave the showbread to David and his companions.
Hmm. Oh, I think Jesus mentions that, right?
Yeah, Mark chapter 2. Yep.
There you go.
And that's the story where Jesus says, you know, now you know that the Son of Man has, authority over. Actually, we talked about this.
Yeah, we did actually.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
did. Yeah.
yeah.
We had
Yeah.
differing ideas on what it meant.
Yeah, I think you won out on that one, didn't
Yeah.
you?
Well, we all win when we're
I think you won on that
discussing the
one.
Bible.
No, no, I think you got me on that one.
All right, I'll take it.
Um,
I liked my explanation better.
I think it was a good explanation. It
Thank
just
you.
took me a while to get convinced of it.
Okay.
So should we read 31 through 36?
Sure. Make a lampstand of pure gold. Hammer out its base and shaft, and make its flower-like cups, buds, and blossoms of one piece with them. 6 branches are to extend from the sides of the lampstand, 3 on one side and 3 on the other. 3 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms are to be on one branch, 3 on the next branch, and the same for all 6 branches extending from the lampstand. And on the lampstand there are to be 4 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms. One bud shall be under the first pair of branches extending from the lampstand, a second bud under the second pair, and a third bud under the third pair, 6 branches in all. The buds and branches shall all be of one piece with the lampstand, hammered out of pure gold. Okay.
That was your favorite section, wasn't it?
And that is so.
This is brutal.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot happening here, and you might be asking yourself, why? Why is this happening? Why
Well,
would...
actually,
Okay, go
I
ahead.
said I don't care.
Well,
I was
it's
going to say, however, that I'm sure you'll have a reason for every single decision made here. So,
okay. So it's going to come up later. We're going to get different flowers, pomegranates, things like that. Well, remember when God was in a perfect state of harmony with humanity? Where was that?
the Garden of Eden.
You got it. And what did the king of Babylon put on his his magnificent palace that he
No.
was so well known for?
How would I know?
The Hanging Gardens.
Is that in the Bible?
No, it's just just a historical fact. I thought you knew about the Hanging Gardens.
I mean, I've heard of their existence. They're like one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, right?
Yeah. In fact, they even developed advanced technology to move water up to irrigate the Hanging Gardens. That's where they got the first water feed screw. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
But the long and short of it was, in the ancient Near East, there was this idea that it was the lesser spirits, the unclean spirits that dwelt in the desert. The good gods, the sacred ones, typically dwelt in these magnificent gardens full of food and nature and greenery and like plushness, and surrounded by gemstones and gold and just the abundance of everything you could want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as they're building the temple, and well, here the tabernacle, we're finding that they're starting to invoke some of the imagery of this idea that, like, well, yeah, obviously God doesn't live in the desert, he lives in a beautiful lush garden,
Mm.
right? And so that's why we see a lot of this imagery surrounding the situation. And every time you hear the word, think of the word paradise. What do you picture?
Plants and stuff.
Yeah, like this
Flowers.
perfect harmony of nature, all of the God's most beautiful creation, right? Um that seems to be what's happening here, is that they're starting to get this idea that they need to recreate this garden setting for where God's presence is going to be.
So probably what happened originally was some metal worker just went to town doing whatever. And then a bunch of years later, they're like, okay, we have to be very exacting with this. Is that likely?
Most likely. Yeah, when they first built this thing, it probably wasn't this intricate. You'll discover a lot of these same things when they build the Temple of Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see a lot of these same design features come back up.
Okay.
Not exactly, but you'll see a bunch of them.
I will look forward to that.
Yeah, it'll take about 7 years to get there, but we'll get there.
Yay.
But that's all the nonsense going here with all the flowers and the blossoms and things like that.
Okay.
But there's another translation choice made by the NRSV here, which is we've got a calyx.
Mm.
You ever see a calyx?
I can't say I've seen one,
I've never even heard of one.
but it's like what, a chalice or something?
I don't know. Actually, let's look it up. It's a type of flower.
That's what I said. You didn't listen to me.
I thought you said chalice.
I didn't say that. I said
Looks like cannabis. Dun 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 dun. But that doesn't look like cannabis there. Okay, so
Okay.
apparently it's a type of
Hmm.
flower. I would imagine it's one of these. Um,
Okay. All right.
see. But that brings up another good point, which is, there was a temple that was unearthed near Jerusalem a while ago,
Okay.
and there was they had these incense altars made of stone where they would burn incense inside of the temple, and you'll never guess what they found on the incense that was still preserved from history.
Marijuana?
Cannabis, yeah.
Wait, really?
Yeah, so when you
Wait, what?
yeah, so um when you burn cannabis, it creates a resin, and then the resin dries and becomes very, very hard. And you can preserve it for, like, literally ever. I mean, it's just resin. And so then you can test it. You can test that resin for cannabinoids. And,
Okay.
anyways, they did. So they found the resins in these incense burners and discovered that they were burning substances that contain cannabis.
Okay.
I'm curious if the calyx is a cannabis-related plant.
Well, are you saying they got high or they weren't using the variant with the THC in it?
Well, they were definitely getting elevated. Yeah, they were getting high for sure.
Well, then how come Christians are so against marijuana?
The calyx is where cannabis resin glands are secreted and produced in abundance. So it sounds like we've got two competing words.
Well,
A calyx is also a flower, but it looks like it's also part of a cannabis plant.
oh, okay.
Um,
Does Calix get you high? There was a question up there.
where's that? Does calyx get you high? The first part of the flower to grow, the calyxes are essentially the crown of the cannabis buds. Yeah, it sounds like the calyx is a title for a part of the cannabis bud.
And they bring one stony baloney high.
Let's see. We'll do calyx flower and see if that's any better. Says the calyx is the first part of the cannabis flower. Right, but I want to know if the flower known as the calyx has got cannabis in it. That's what I want to know.
All right, you want to? I mean, if I can find these answers a lot better than, oh boy, being silly all the
Sorry, I
time.
should have asked Chat GTP.
See, that's
Not.
what I'm saying. Why do you not do that? All right, what do you want to know?
It says the calyx is the outermost part of a flower that surrounds the bud and protects it as it's developed. Okay, so a calyx might actually be not what it might not be a type of flower. It might be a part of a flower. Look on plant anatomy. It doesn't really. There we go. The sepals, collectively called the calyx, most resemble leaves because of their generally green. Okay, so the calyx is a part of a flower, is what it's saying.
Okay.
That makes sense. Is that what Chat GTP got you?
Yeah, it's the outermost part of a flower.
Shit, that was way faster.
Yeah, really.
So, anyways, the long and short of it is all that to say, um, there shall be a calyx of one piece with it under the first pair of branches. So they're describing the type of what the flower is going to look like now.
Okay.
Interesting. And this is going to be a flower shaped lampstand.
And
It looks
they're
like
very exacting.
it's very exacting. They're describing the individual petals of the flower.
Yeah. Why?
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, the long and short of it is, what was that temple? The Was it Jarud?
Hmm?
Tel Arad. At Tel Arad, it says a well-preserved substance found 2,700 years ago in Tel Arad has been identified as cannabis, including its psychoactive compound. Here's a picture of one of the incense burners.
Hmm.
So they found it dried or melted
Wait, is an
essentially.
incense burner? You burn it and then you breathe in the smoke?
Well, you don't I mean, it fills the room, so if you're in the room, you're gonna breathe it in.
Oh, is that how incense works? Oh, is that right?
Mhm.
I thought it was just to smell good or something.
Well, it does smell good, but you're not gonna smell it if you don't breathe it in.
Yeah, I guess. Well, they sell these incense burners all over the place, you know?
Mhm.
And those aren't for like marijuana, I don't think. They're just for smelling
Mhm.
things that smell nice, right?
Right, yeah.
But the smoke gets in your nose then,
Yeah,
and then in
if you
your
burn a lot
lungs.
of it. Yeah.
That doesn't seem healthy.
So there was getting high with the Most High
Yeah,
was what was happening.
kind of weird,
I mean,
right?
if you wanna have a mystical experience,
I don't think marijuana is the.
take a psychoactive drug and
Yeah, but I
see what
don't think
happens.
marijuana is psychoactive.
Mhm.
No, I don't think so.
Sure is, yeah.
I don't think so.
It is.
No, not like like LSD or anything. You know what I mean?
It is. Yep. Weed, cannabis is psychoactive. It contains tetrahydrocannabinol
Yeah, but
or
it's.
THC, which binds to receptors in the brain and produces such effects as so on and so forth.
I don't think it does altered perception though, huh?
I think it does actually.
It's
Yeah.
hallucinations.
Yeah. People do hallucinate if you have too much of it. If you
Hallucination.
overdose,
I don't think that's true.
it is very true. Yeah.
I don't think
That's
so.
why a good number of people actually get paranoid when they have too much of it
Why?
because their brain starts like imagining scenarios.
Oh,
It's you can have too much THC and have a real bad hallucination. That's one of the biggest problems with gummies is gummies are really strong, and sometimes people have them for the first time, they don't realize how strong they are, and they eat too many. It takes a while to kick in, and before you know it, they're, jumping out windows.
jumping out of windows. We're not talking about LSD here.
I'm just telling you, listen, THC in high doses can mess you up, is what I'm saying. It's one of those drugs that, like, you gotta ease yourself into it.
But they always say that
Not not the '90s anymore. We got strong stuff now.
it's very safe.
It is.
Like you can't overdose.
Okay, so you have to differentiate between the type of stuff that was around when we were teenagers and the type of stuff they have now. Type of stuff they have now is like highly potent and like condensed.
Mm.
Like when I was a kid, you could like smoke a whole bowl yourself and be like
What's a bowl?
um a bowl. You ever seen
Like of
a
cereal?
pipe?
Oh, is that what it
A pipe, we
is?
call it a pipe. Okay,
Oh,
when I was a youngster, you could smoke, a whole pipe yourself and just, like, mellow out for a while. Um, Now, I mean, you don't need, like, only like, if you get a THC vape pen,
yeah.
holy shit. Listen, you take one hit of that thing and you need to go find a couch to lay on.
Really?
Yeah.
That's not good, right? That seems like it's too much.
Very strong.
Well, then why don't they have less in it?
Well, they do, they sell it in different, strengths.
Oh, but sometimes you get accustomed to it and you need a higher dosage. Just like with all other things that are addictive,
Right.
right?
Mhm,
Just like caffeine,
mhm. That's why caffeine doesn't have any effect on me.
but it's not addictive apparently.
Well, addictive is different than building a tolerance. Like, so for example, if you build a tolerance to something, that means you just need more of it to get the desired effect. But addiction has something similar, but it also means that you can't go without it,
Hmm.
right? So, like, if you smoke marijuana for a while, you might build a tolerance, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're addicted to it because most people don't go through like withdrawals when they aren't smoking marijuana.
Yeah, well,
It's not to say that people can't get addicted to it. I'm sure you could, just like you can get addicted to sugar or anything else.
and you
Um,
need even more sugar to get the same high.
yeah.
Is that a thing?
Sugar addiction is real.
I mean, you need more. I forget it. I don't care. We're done.
All right, let's read last
Nope.
what?
I got a bunch to say, buddy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you got through it.
Oh no.
All right, let's have it.
Oh no, no, no. I didn't write this just for my own
I I I I
edification.
lost track of the conversation. Where were we at?
I wrote that for our 6 viewers.
All right, sure.
Okay, can you scroll somewhere?
Right, yeah, right here.
Yeah, that looks right.
Mhm.
So, can you imagine how much a lampstand of pure gold would be worth?
Be heavy too.
I mean, up until now, things have been what? Coated.
Hammered, yeah, yeah.
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 So, and it would have been about 3 to 5 feet tall.
Mhm.
So, therefore, in today's money, it would have been valued at over $3 million.
Mm.
Now, ChatGPT had a hard time determining how much a talent of gold would have cost 2 to 3 thousand years ago or whatever. But I made it give me a number, and it said that if you have a talent of gold, you were, quote, king loveful worthy, and refused to elaborate.
Huh.
So I'm guessing it was a lot.
It was a lot. And this was common inside of a temple to have these high-priced vessels and things. That's why in the ancient world, whenever somebody, like, invaded another person's country,
Mm-hmm.
they would go to the temple and steal all the utensils. That was like they just knew, "Hey, that's where the treasury was, that's where the good stuff is, go and take their stuff." And, sometimes they would reuse it. Like, for example, in the book of Daniel, when Belteshazzar is having the feast, he's, like, degrading God by using the utensils from the temple.
Hmm. Oh, with just a normal food
Right.
thingy.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of the beginning of Les Mis, right?
I actually haven't seen it.
Where oh,
I did dream a dream of days gone by, though.
that's funny. Where what's his name? Jean Valjean starts off by eluding a church to get all
Mhm.
their, metal and stuff.
It's always fun to have 2 first names that are also the same name.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being named like, Dan Von Lukens Dan? Like, what?
I can't imagine.
Although, listen, I mean, the the Germans, doing the Von was a smart move. Anyone that's got Von in their name sounds immediately dope, like, just
Yeah.
sounds awesome, don't they?
Like a baron.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like a Von Trapp.
Yeah, yeah, mhm.
Yeah. I think that's where it goes. Anyhow, so gold's worth a lot. So here's a question. Was that stuff kind of locked up or anything? Or did they just assume people aren't going to take it because that would be bad to their gods and all that?
The theory is God would kill him.
But in reality,
In
people,
reality, somebody would have been there.
oh,
There were people that were working at the like, permanently all the time working at the entrance of the tent of meeting.
oh, really?
Yeah.
So you couldn't just wait for them to go home for the night or something?
Yeah, exactly. There's rotations.
Is it because that's just what they had to do, or is it because they knew this stuff was expensive and stolen?
In real life, probably both.
Well, not real life. I thought we were talking about real
I mean,
life.
in the Bible, I mean, they
Yeah,
don't really tell you why, but I mean, in real life, you would have to have
I
somebody
know, but
there.
in the Bible, did they think it was worth a lot of money? And
They would have had to know, and that's a lot of gold.
right,
I mean, that's like a bar of gold.
I'd love to know where they even got it.
Apparently, all those predisposed Egyptians.
Right.
It's such a weird thing that we have all these slaves that just happen to have all this gold. Mm.
They must have been doing some trading.
Must have. There's some
I mean,
bartering.
there's a ton of mana.
What they did to kill all the Amalekites. Maybe they took their. Um,
Maybe they sold some quail. Huh?
could you imagine? Okay, let's get. This is okay. Could you imagine that God sends all this manna? You go and you collect it, and you like go to the Amalekites and be, hey, listen, we'll sell you these jars of manna from heaven
Mm.
and give us a bunch of gold, and then like, well, joke's on you. I mean, that's a really good idea.
At midnight, they just turn to maggots.
Yeah, could you imagine how mad? Maybe that's why the Amalekites came to kill him.
It might have been.
That's the editor's cut that got left on the floor.
Mhm.
That's why the Amalekites were so mad. They got the bad manna, and there was maggots everywhere, and they was pissed off. See, now I'm on Team Amalekite.
Oh,
That's
okay.
pretty dirty.
And the Israelites were like, "Hey, fix these backs."
Yeah, basically. Oh boy, it's a good theory.
Thank you. 37 to 39.
Sure.
Then make it 7 lamps and what? Then make it 7 lamps and set them up on it so that they light the space in front of it. Its wick trimmers and trays are to be of pure gold. A talent of pure gold is to be used for the lampstand and all these accessories.
A lot.
You know what I just realized?
Mm.
This lampstand was a menorah.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah.
It was a menorah.
That took me a long time. Hey, do you think this is where Jewish people got the idea of using a menorah for their Hanukkah festivities? Had a menorah existed before this?
So the menorah has got a very difficult past to trace, but um the biblical text is where they get the idea for the menorah, and it was popularized because of Hanukkah. Because that was the miracle that where the lights didn't go out.
Yeah, right. For 8 days or something.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, but the menorahs here have 7 things it said, right?
Mhm.
But their oil lasted for 8 days.
I don't think the individual part of the menorah is signifying a particular day.
Oh, I thought it was. I thought they lit one candle every day or something.
I'm not sure what the ritual is.
Well, neither have I, but I have had some of that latke.
We should actually I think Leviticus explains that, the lighting of the menorah. I don't know if it shows up in Exodus, but
That's why would but that oil thing is not in the Bible, right?
it's in Maccabees.
Oh, it is for reals?
Yeah, this is what I keep telling you. There's so much history here that are in the apocryphal books that you got to read it.
Oh, the macro. That's not the real book then,
No, it is.
but
The
it's not in the Bible.
first and second Maccabees is in the Bible. Yeah,
Well, you said it was apocrypha,
that's part of the Bible.
so it's not apocrypha.
It is. It's called the apocrypha traditionally, but it's just the Bible.
Is it in my regular Bible?
No,
Well, then it's not in the Bible.
it
It's
is.
apocrypha.
Well, your Bible took them out. Whoever made your Bible is wrong.
Well, my Bible had a lot of things taken out of them then,
Right.
like Mr. Enoch's book.
Right.
You know.
Even the Protestants read the apocrypha. Like if you read the writings from medieval Europe during the Protestant Reformation, they're quoting the apocryphal books like they're scripture. Like this idea that the apocrypha wasn't scripture is a modern convention. This is not something that was traditionally a Christian thing. Is the modern age just decided in the late 1800s that they weren't going to have it anymore and tried to get rid of it?
And it wasn't the 1800s. It was like
Yeah.
much earlier than
Huh.
that. The Council of Nicaea.
Nope.
Yeah, that was like in, boy, I don't know, sometime.
The church councils actually didn't get rid of the apocrypha at all.
I'll just Google.
In fact,
Look
here
it up.
is a King James Bible from 1823.
Hey, look at that old thing. Like if I
And
blow on it, it'll just turn to dust.
this is an old one, I know. And what you'll notice is my King James Bible from 1823 includes the apocrypha.
That's. Are you like a Bible collector?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I should get you one of the messages.
Uh,
I know it's not necessary, but I want to.
I don't think I needed one of those.
Well.
I'm a Bible collector, not a.
Yes.
Certainly not a Bible.
Mm.
Fair enough. It's a wonderful piece of literature. It pains me every time to bring up the message because I like Eugene Peterson. I just the message just isn't the Bible. But what were we saying? Yeah, the Apocrypha is good. You need to read the Apocrypha sometime. It's not very long.
All of it?
Yeah.
Or just the Maccabees?
All of it.
All of the Apocrypha is not long.
Right.
But there's a lot of the books, right?
You can read through it in like a week.
How many pages would that be?
Maybe 100 pages.
Oh, really?
Maybe 200. I don't know.
Ooh, 200. Stop that.
Hard to, but it's not huge. It's not like
So I could do it in a couple months.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a slow reader and I don't like reading.
Oh well.
Yeah.
I'm a fast reader and I highlight stuff, and when I highlight it, I can usually lock it into my memory. Because then when I go back and skim over it later, I read the highlights and it reminds me of everything that I read before, and that's like
Yeah, 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 we get it.
that's
That's
the
why you're the English major, all right? I get
you're
it.
the English
I'm
major.
just an engineer, you know? I don't know nothing about no words,
Listen, you're the wordsmith.
and I'm doing a terrible
I
job.
just happen to have a visual memory.
You and Moses, huh?
Apparently,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so a lot of gold.
A lot of gold.
We read the last verse.
Sure.
Okay.
See that you make them according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. So I hope Moses has like a photographic memory, or could at least visit the mountain every so often just to like get another look at the schematic,
Right.
you know?
So here's my thought. As, as God is speaking to Moses, I'm assuming that he's writing all of it down,
Okay.
or else there's no way that he's remembering this.
Actually written it down on a tablet of rock.
Well, he was already writing the covenant earlier in the prior chapter, right?
Was he?
Yeah. If you go back to chapter 24,
No, I remember that terrible covenant.
there's a section in here where he wrote something, wasn't it? Was it? Did he
Uh,
say write or wrote?
I have no idea.
Oh, there we go.
Written.
Says, I will give you the tablets of stone with law, and the commandment which I have written
Yeah,
for
but
their
yeah, but
instruction.
God wrote that.
And then later it says, or
Ah.
prior it says, and Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. So he's got something, right?
So, well, he was one of the more educated ones, right?
It would seem that
Did they
way.
use that papyrus back in Egypt?
I definitely believe they had papyrus in Egypt.
So
Yeah,
he probably had like a papyrus notebook or something,
he had to have
like a
something.
3-ring spiral binder
That's what it
of
was.
papyrus,
Yeah. Hmm.
and the spirals were made of bronze.
A papyrus keeper. Remember those?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah,
I don't know if binder keepers are still the same thing anymore, but um, fascinating chapter. I'm still a little taken aback by the amount of gold that it's
yeah.
presumed that they have on hand.
Right, that's a lot.
But to be fair, what are they going to do with it?
Spend it on things.
Who are they going to spend it with?
Well, neighboring tribes.
I guess they're supposed to kill all the neighboring tribes.
Oh, they are. So
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like they're all going to be dead. So I guess, like, what are they gonna do? They're not gonna spend it on anything. Might as well use it to build the
I don't know. I
tabernacle.
mean, before they were freed, I'm sure they knew that gold was worth a ton of money.
Yeah.
So once they're freed, I'm surprised they weren't like, I don't want to keep it. You know,
Mm.
they were just like, oh yeah, let's give it all to God. I mean, I would understand it if they truly believed in God,
It was a free will
but
offering.
since they always seem to doubt,
Mhm.
I don't know.
That's a fair point. A lot of doubters. But, like, in any large group of people, you've got doubters and, like, hardliners,
Mm,
right? I bet the hardliners gave a lot
right.
and the doubters gave
Yeah.
little.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I still, of all the stuff in the chapter so far, I just appreciate the fact that the offering to make the tabernacle was an offering of goodwill and not compulsion.
Yeah.
That just seems like the right thing to
Oh,
do.
it does
You know what I
definitely.
mean?
Yeah.
Like deep down inside, it feels like the right. Could you imagine if God was like, "Give me all your gold"? Like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what are you doing with all this gold, God?
One more question.
Hmm.
We don't have to go into it at length, but you did mention that you thought the Ark of the Covenant was real.
I think they probably built one. Yeah. In fact, we've got some data to suggest that it wasn't the only time there was an ark of that nature built. There's some data that suggests that even in ancient Egypt, similar arks were built. In fact, my buddy Chet wrote something on this before.
Yeah, where is your buddy Chet? Me neither.
I don't think he's with us
Hey,
today,
that's what I asked. If he was, I wouldn't have to ask. All right.
but here's a picture of one.
Mm-hmm.
one such example.
Ancient Egyptian parallels to the Ark of the Covenant. What do you think that means?
Well, I'm just saying that
Hey, look, it is by your little friend.
I told you Chet wrote it.
That's cute.
Chet's dynamite,
Oh,
buddy.
look, it's that website you own.
Yes, this is my website. You did it.
I didn't know we were sponsored.
We are now. So yeah, so Chet wrote this. Looks like some of the pictures aren't showing up anymore. I guess my website's broken. But Chet wrote this article back in
Wow, that
2017,
was a
so it's
long time ago.
like 8 years now.
Yeah.
But we do have parallels to the Ark of the Covenant in the ancient world. So it's not
Well, which came first?
well, this one from Egypt, I don't know if he explored any of the dating methods behind
Maybe
this
in all those
one.
images we can't see.
Yeah, I don't know. I bet I mean there's probably some archaeological data that we can pull up on this. I just don't happen to have any right now.
Then again, just because they made an arc beforehand doesn't mean you can't have one afterward.
No, of
But I
course
would
not.
be curious to see how similar they are on the descriptions, because this one, it looks pretty plain to me, right?
It's
It's like a
basic.
box with a little doggy on top or something, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. So all that to say, the idea of making an ark, of some sort of a sacred vessel of this nature was not uncommon.
What do you think they thought they had in theirs?
I don't know actually what was in it. It's a really good question. Maybe we should do some research on this week, and before we start next week, we should discuss the nature of ancient arcs.
Okay, I'm not going to do that, so you better
Okay.
remember.
All right. I'll put a bookmark on it.
All right.
But to be sure, it wasn't like the first time. Like if when God said, to build the Ark of the Covenant, they wouldn't be like, "What's an ark?"
Right. Yeah.
They would have known what an ark was.
Yeah, that's true. Not a brand new word or
In
anything.
fact, let me get a book behind you.
All right. Should I stay here?
Let's move. In this book that I keep breaking the binding on.
You got to break the binding as soon as you buy a book.
I tell you what.
You know why? Because otherwise, you're going to treat it like it was some sort of a treasured object and not read it.
Actually, we should have been looking through this as we were reading the text. I forgot that this is probably one of my favorite books um
Exodus?
for going through the tabernacle
Oh,
stuff.
well, we can do this again next week.
Well, I don't think we need to.
But we could.
But it explains a lot of the ancient Near Eastern background material, and explains a lot of stuff behind it. So this is the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary. And Exodus was done by Bruce Wells. He's a professor at Johns Hopkins, and it's got also John Walton does Genesis. Eugene Carpenter did Deuteronomy. So it's a pretty decent commentary series, but there's lots of pictures of other examples in the ancient world of similar artifacts. In fact, you even got a picture of the Jewish people with the menorah
Oh, wow, look at that
carving there.
crazy looking thing.
Um,
You think that's what it was? That on the thing?
what do you mean?
I thought it was more like, like that.
What?
Like what a menorah looks like.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, but I think you're talking about that
Oh,
one.
not that. No, no, not that. Not that. That's an Assyrian description. So they don't have a picture of another ark in here, except there is one. We'll have to look this one. This is the relief in the Hippostyle Hall at Edfu depicts the procession of the sacred barbecue. The procession includes carrying a sacred relic on poles by priests. Kind of an interesting image.
Is there an image?
That's supposed to be an ark right there, where they're giving
Oh.
barbecue to God.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Anyways, long and short of it is, I'll leave this open for next week. But yeah, I don't know. We'll talk a little bit more about arcs next week.
All right, sweet. And we'll talk about the next chapter's stuff, which I presume is more of the tabernacle
Yeah,
stuff.
Leviticus is gonna get wild.
This isn't Leviticus.
I
This is
know.
like this silly.
I know. I can't wait to get
Does
Leviticus.
Leviticus deal with the tabernacle too?
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
can see why would need it twice.
It's a
That
little
makes
more
sense.
forward looking. It's just assuming that they're gonna be building a temple in the future. But, the instructions for the tabernacle don't have that forward looking element.
Forward?
Well, what I'm saying is when we get to Leviticus, there are instructions given to Moses saying, when you build the temple or, the place where my presence will be and whatnot, do this, this, and this. We don't really find that in the building of the tabernacle. God's like, just build a tabernacle.
Hmm.
If all these instructions came after the building of the temple, we would expect it to read a little bit more like Leviticus, where it's envisioning the temple existing already. But we don't actually catch that in the Exodus tabernacle text. God just tells them to build a tabernacle, doesn't say anything about what's going to happen in the future, which to me, would say that, it's possible the text could have been written, during the reign of King David, even, you know, or just before the tabernacle was ceasing to be used and the temple was built. Hard to say.
No idea what you're talking about. All right.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
So the tabernacle and the temple must be two different things.
Yeah, yeah. The
Ah.
temple is like an actual building. The tabernacle is a big tent.
And that took me a while, but
Sorry, I just assumed.
wait, so next chapter we're talking about the temple?
No,
We're still talking about the
next
tabernacle.
book. The next book they start talking about the temple. So
Okay.
when we get out of Exodus and into
Why?
Leviticus.
Because they finally have a place to live?
Well, because it was written much later at a time period where they clearly had the temple already. And so they were writing a story about the ancient past, but trying to include what was happening now. Whereas Exodus so far doesn't seem to be doing that. It doesn't seem to be writing from a time period in which everyone already had a temple.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, okay, I'll give you an example. All right, if I'm telling a mythological story about the founding of America, I would say, well, George Washington said, God gave him instructions and said, when you guys discover, how to communicate over long distances, make sure that you have 8-digit phone numbers or was something like that, right? Well, I mean, obviously, you're writing in a time period in which phones already existed, and you're trying to put it in the past on George Washington's mouth.
Mm,
That's what's happening in Leviticus. It's writing about stuff that's clearly talking about a time period where the temple already existed, and
okay.
they're putting it on the ancient mouth of God.
Oh, okay.
Whereas in Exodus, it doesn't really read like it's from a time period where the temple already existed. It's reading as like a genuinely pretty archaic text.
Okay.
But not so archaic that it's actually from Moses' time period,
Of course.
which is fine.
Fine.
But, I suppose that's it for the week. Next week, we'll, get back more in the tabernacle instructions. This will be a good time.
Yeah. Yay. I mean,
Um,
yay.
there's some more story time coming in chapter, like 30. I believe chapter 30, we finally get to the golden calf.
Oh, about bloody time.
So, I mean, a couple more chapters, we get the real fun stuff. We get
Yeah.
the calf incident. Moses is going to break the tablets and burn the calf down into ashes and force the Israelites to drink it. It's gonna be wild.
And then they're gonna get into the promised land, right?
Yeah.
No, Moses got very upset with a rock or
Well,
something.
they're not gonna go to the promised land until after we finish Deuteronomy.
Oh no.
Yeah, they don't. Not a single person steps foot in the promised land until after you get to do all the way through Deuteronomy.
And that's not even the next book, right?
No, that's Joshua.
What?
Joshua's the first book they cross over.
No, 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 no.
So
So
you
so
gotta go through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and then after Deuteronomy, you finally get crossing over the Jordan.
oh, wow.
You gotta go through all that mess just to get to the conquest.
So we're gonna have like Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, 4 books just about them wandering in the wilderness
Yep.
for 40 years.
Yep.
4 books
Well, yep.
of them wandering around.
Yep.
1 book every 10 years.
Yep. This is a very important time period, apparently.
Just surprised so much happens. I mean, they're just wandering around.
Well, that's the thing is, If Moses is the lawgiver and he's hearing from God, and you need to update the text, well, every time you update the text and you add stuff to the laws, you have to write news stories about what happened when Moses was alive. Just keep adding more stuff to Moses' time period.
Mm.
Just like they did with the Epic of Gilgamesh, as we've talked so many times before.
Mhm.
It's a meta narrative that's critical to the foundation of their culture, and when things change, they add to the meta narrative. You know?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's the only reason why I doubt that at the time period that King David lived, that they had all these texts. Most of them were added much later.
Okay.
But unfortunately, because Moses was the authority, when you add them, you got to add them back before the conquest.
Mhm.
So, um, that's it for the week, eh?
It certainly is.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for being here, and we'll see you again in 7 more days. Cheers.